Big break in a cold case. The Troup County Sheriff announcing a missing Auburn University student's car was found this week in Alabama, decades after Kyle Clinkscales disappeared in 1976.
For 45 years, the waters of a quiet Alabama creek held a secret no one could see, a secret that belonged to a young man who vanished without a trace. Imagine this, a rusted car, half sunken beneath layers of silt and time. Its windows clouded, its frame consumed by the earth. Inside, a decaying wallet, a weathered driver's license, and what appears to be human remains. For decades, the world moved on. The seasons changed. The creek kept flowing. But somewhere in that still water, an answer was waiting. This discovery, one random day, one call to 911, would shatter nearly half a century of silence. The name that would echo from the depths was Kyle Clinkscales. He was only 22 years old when he disappeared in January 1976. A college student from LaGrange, Georgia, driving back to Auburn University in Alabama, where he was studying. It was supposed to be a short trip, just 70 miles. But somewhere between LaGrange and Auburn, Kyle vanished. For years, his parents refused to give up. Investigators searched rivers, bridges, highways, and hearts. But nothing. No car. No clues. No Kyle. And then, in 2021, 45 years after he left home, the creek gave up its secret. A 1974 Ford Pinto, buried in mud and memory, re-emerged. This is the story of that car. This is the story of the boy who drove it. This is the story of a family that never stopped searching. Before we begin, a question for you. Where are you watching from right now? Type your city or country in the comments below, because stories like this one reach across miles and memories. Let's see how far Kyle's story travels today. And if you believe that every missing soul deserves to be found, if you believe that time should never erase the truth, then don't just watch. Subscribe to the Found Files right now. Because when you do, you make sure stories like Kyle's are never forgotten again. Decades of silence are about to break. The truth, long buried, is about to surface. This is the Found Files. LaGrange, Georgia, a small southern town in the mid-1970s, where life moved at the pace of the seasons. Brick storefronts, narrow highways, and tight-knit neighborhoods formed the backdrop of a simpler time. It was here that a young man named Kyle Clinkscales grew up, full of energy, laughter, and quiet ambition. He was 22, a college student at Auburn University in Alabama, studying business, balancing his education with a job back home. In the evenings, Kyle worked at the Moose Club, a local bar and social spot where everyone knew his name. His coworkers described him as bright, kind, always quick with a grin and a joke. One of his friends would later say, his personality was just charming. He was a sweet guy. To those who knew him, Kyle wasn't just another college kid, he was the kind of person you remembered. The kind of person who'd make you laugh before you realized you needed it. His parents, John and Louise Clinkscales, adored him. He was their only child, their pride and joy. John was a hard-working man, steady and determined, Louise, warm and deeply protective of her son. Together, they had raised Kyle to dream big but stay humble. Every trip back home to LaGrange was a reminder of how much they cherished him, and every return to Auburn carried their whispered prayers for his safety and success. In those years, the world was changing fast. It was 1976, before cell phones, before GPS, before digital trails could trace a missing path. When someone disappeared, finding them depended on memory, maps, and hope. Back then, the drive from LaGrange to Auburn was familiar to Kyle, a winding 70-mile stretch through woods and quiet backroads. He'd made the trip countless times before. To his parents, there was no reason to worry. But none of them could know that one ordinary Tuesday night in January would become the line that split their lives forever, the last time they would see their son walk out the door, keys in hand, ready to return to school. Years later, Kyle's father, John, would pour his heartbreak into a book titled Kyle's Story, Friday Never Came. It was both a tribute and a cry for answers, a father's way of keeping his son's name alive when the world seemed to have forgotten. This was the world Kyle left behind, one of promise, family, and love. A world frozen in time the moment his taillights disappeared down that Georgia road, fading into darkness, never to be seen again. It was the night of January 27, 1976, cold, quiet, and ordinary. For Kyle Clinkscales, it was supposed to be just another drive. After finishing his shift at the Moose Club in LaGrange, he said a few goodbyes, grabbed his jacket, and stepped out into the night. He carried the same easy smile he always did, the kind that gave his parents peace of mind. He packed a few belongings into his car, a white 1974 Ford Pinto runabout, and told friends he was heading back to Auburn University. He had made this trip dozens of times before, about 70 miles along the stretch connecting Georgia to Alabama, crossing Interstate 85 and winding through dark, rural roads. But that night, somewhere along that familiar path, something happened. Hours passed. Then a day. Then another. Kyle never made it back to campus. His roommates at Auburn hadn't seen him. His professors hadn't heard from him. And when he didn't call home, his parents' concern turned to dread. By the end of the week, John and Louise Clinkscales reported their son missing. The search began immediately. Deputies combed highways, police departments sent out alerts, and volunteers retraced the route Kyle should have taken. Yet no tire marks, no wreckage, no signs of struggle. It was as if the road had swallowed him whole. Investigators drained lakes, searched bridges, and interviewed anyone who might have seen him that night. But nothing emerged. No witnesses. No clues. Not even a trace of his white Pinto. For years, the story of Kyle Clinkscales haunted both Georgia and Alabama, the young college student who vanished into thin air. His mother, Louise, would later say in anguish, "It was like the earth opened, and he vanished." In the absence of answers, speculation grew. Some believed Kyle had run off the road in the darkness, that his car lay hidden somewhere beneath deep water or dense forest. Others feared something darker, that foul play had silenced him, that someone out there knew exactly what happened. But as time passed, hope faded into uncertainty. Every year that followed brought new rumors, dead-end leads, and quiet heartbreak for a family that refused to stop searching. For John and Louise Clinkscales, each sunrise was a reminder that their son's seat at the table was still empty, and each sunset carried the same haunting question that would echo for decades. How does a young man, and his car, simply disappear? For nearly 5 decades, the name Kyle Clinkscales lingered in police files, in family prayers, and in the whispers of a small Georgia town that never forgot. His absence became a quiet ache, a mystery frozen in time. As the years slipped by, investigators refused to close the case. Leads surfaced, only to fade. Theories came and went. Every few years, someone claimed to know something, to have heard something, to have seen something. But the truth stayed buried. Visuals of calendar pages turning, newspaper headlines yellowing, and family photos aging marked the passage of time, a visual reminder that while the world moved forward, Kyle's story stood still. Then, in 2005, almost 30 years after he vanished, hope flickered again. A surprising twist emerged. 2 people, Jimmy Earl Jones and Gene Johnson, were arrested and charged with hindering the investigation. According to a witness, Kyle had allegedly been murdered the night he disappeared, and his body hidden in a concrete drum. The story shook the small community to its core. Could it be that all this time, someone knew what happened? That the answers had been buried not in a lake, but in silence? But as quickly as the lead appeared, it unraveled. No murder weapon, no body, no car. The alleged witnesses' claims could not be verified. In the end, no one was ever charged with Kyle's murder. The truth, once again, dissolved into uncertainty. While detectives battled dead ends, the human toll deepened. His parents, John and Louise, aged under the weight of waiting. Every phone call could have been the one. Every knock at the door could have been the news. Friends who had gone to Auburn with him said years later, everybody was always wondering if he was going to show up somewhere. the Clinkscales family lived between hope and heartbreak, never knowing which day might finally bring closure. By 2007, Kyle's father John passed away, never learning what happened to his only son. And in January 2021, just 11 months before the long-awaited discovery, Louise Clinkscales died, still waiting for a knock that never came. For 45 years, their home in Lagrange remained a place of unanswered prayers, where a mother left her porch light on, believing that somehow, someday, her boy might find his way home. And then, almost half a century later, the road finally spoke. Then, on December 7, 2021, a call came into 911, a call that would reopen a door believed forever closed. A man in Chambers County, Alabama, reported something unusual in a shallow, murky creek along County Road 83. Beneath the surface, tangled in mud and tree roots, lay the faint outline of a vehicle, corroded by time, but unmistakably there. When authorities arrived, the air was thick with disbelief. For decades, this same stretch of land had been driven over thousands of times, by locals, by searchers, by chance, yet the secret beneath had remained hidden. As the Chambers County Sheriff's Office and Alabama state troopers moved in, a dive team waded into the dark water. The mud clung to everything, and slowly, inch by inch, the vehicle emerged. A white 1974 Ford Pinto runabout, its shape distorted by years underwater, but its story, painfully familiar. The tag and VIN number confirmed what no one dared to believe at first. It was Kyle Clinkscales' car, the same one he had driven the night he disappeared in 1976. Inside the vehicle, time had preserved more than anyone expected. Investigators discovered a wallet, a driver's license, and credit cards, all bearing Kyle's name. Among the debris, they also found skeletal remains, resting where the driver's seat once was. Forensic teams from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation and the Federal Bureau of Investigation were called in to handle the discovery. The remains were carefully collected, sent for DNA testing, and cross-referenced with the Clinkscales family records. After nearly half a century of silence, the case that had haunted Lagrange, Georgia, finally had its first tangible evidence: a car, a wallet, a body. But even as the headlines spread and the world watched in disbelief, those closest to the case knew that this was not just discovery, it was resurrection. A family's decades-long question, where did Kyle go, was finally being answered, one bone, one artifact, one memory at a time. And yet, as investigators and forensic experts waited for final confirmation, everyone, from police to neighbors to lifelong friends, held their breath. After 45 years, would science finally confirm what the heart had known all along? In February 2023, nearly 47 years after Kyle Clinkscales vanished, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation confirmed the truth that the town of Lagrange had been waiting to hear for almost half a century. The skeletal remains pulled from the submerged Ford Pinto were positively identified as Kyle Clinkscales. For decades, his name had lingered on missing person lists, his photograph fading on bulletin boards, his story passed down through generations as one of Georgia's most haunting unsolved mysteries. And now, at last, the search is over. The confirmation closed the file on a missing person case first opened in 1976, but it also opened new questions that no laboratory could answer. How did Kyle's car end up in that creek? Was it an accident on a lonely night drive back to Auburn University, a slick road, a missed curve, a tragic twist of fate? Or was there something darker? Foul play, perhaps, whispers of danger that had trailed the case for years but never found evidence strong enough to prove? Investigators from Chambers County Sheriff's Office admitted that the cause and manner of death may never be determined. Too much time had passed. Too much evidence had washed away with the years. But even in the absence of answers, there was closure. Kyle had been found. His story, at last, could be told, not as a legend or rumor, but as a truth finally unearthed from the silence. There is a poignant irony to the moment, that both of Kyle's parents, John and Louise Clinkscales, had passed away before hearing the confirmation. His father, John, had died in 2007, still searching. His mother, Louise, passed away in January 2021, just 11 months before the discovery. For them, the waiting ended in hope rather than resolution. But for those who remain, Kyle's extended family, his friends, the investigators who never gave up, this final revelation offered a quiet kind of peace. The community of Lagrange gathered once more, not for a search, but for remembrance. People spoke of Kyle's laughter, his kindness, and the boy who had simply vanished one night between Georgia and Alabama. And through their grief, they found something to hold on to, a lesson about perseverance, faith, and the unrelenting pull of truth, no matter how long it takes to surface. Nearly 5 decades after his disappearance, the mystery of Kyle Clinkscales has come full circle. A name that once symbolized loss, now represents discovery. A story once marked by silence, now echoes with truth. Kyle's journey reminds us that time doesn't erase the questions we carry, it only buries them, waiting for the day they rise to the surface. The pain of the unanswered, the hope of discovery, and the bittersweet peace of closure all meet here, in the quiet ripples of a southern creek that finally gave up its secret. The car that was once Kyle's, a white 1974 Ford Pinto, now sits preserved as evidence, its metal scarred by years underwater, but its meaning eternal. The roads between Lagrange, Georgia, and Auburn, Alabama, still hum with the same winds that once carried him home. Kyle's story is not just about death, it's about persistence, about the unrelenting love of parents who refuse to forget, about a community that never stopped asking, and about the power of science, faith, and time converging to bring a lost soul home. And now, to everyone watching this. If you've ever known someone who disappeared, or ever wished for someone to be found, share this video. Let Kyle's story travel farther than he ever could. And if you haven't yet, please like this video and subscribe to the Found Files, because here, we don't let stories fade into silence. We remember them. We tell them. We find them.